everybody. If you don't know who I am, my name is Farrah Rains, and I am a school-based occupational therapy assistant and a licensed massage therapist. So I thought it would be helpful to make a video talking about scissor skills. Don't say that word! That's a common reaction from many parents. Cutting can be very, very stressful. And it can be frustrating for the kids as well. So, I'm going to share some helpful tips that will hopefully make cutting with little ones go a little bit smoother. Now, I'd like to talk about positioning. The first thing is, where should you work on cutting with your child? I suggest using an actual child-size chair and a table. Your child needs to be able to sit in a chair and not fall over. So that's something to work on, regardless if they have a pair of scissors in their hands or not. So really try to encourage them to sit up, and if they do have poor sitting balance, then that's whenever you want to look at other seating options. But today I'm just talking about using a regular chair. And then the other thing is, do they have good head control? Next thing to look at is their feet. And I've been guilty of this. A lot of times we'll just grab a chair that's close, have the child sit in it, and it's just not a good fit for them because their legs are hanging and their feet are not touching the floor. Now, if this is happening, you want to either get a smaller chair or slide a footstool, or you can get creative and make a footrest out of some old phone books or magazines, and all you need is a stack of books and then wrap them really good with duct tape. Voila! There's your footrest. If you notice your child is having trouble sitting upright and they just keep slouching, a lot of times what I like to do at school, we have wedges, and I'll just slide that right behind them, and it just kind of helps them sit upright. Now at home you may not have a wedge, but you could roll up a towel, or you could make a footrest like I said earlier and slide that back behind, or prop with a pillow. Whatever you have that can help support them. Let's talk about scissor positioning. Now, I just grabbed a regular pair of kids' scissors. You'll notice there is a small opening and a large opening. I really like this style because you can definitely see the difference between the two openings. Now, there are other scissors that actually they look similar. They have like two small openings. I try to stay away from that. That's my own personal preference, just because I feel like visually the kids do better with these. So when I'm teaching the kids how to position their fingers into the scissors, the openings there, I like to have them give me a thumbs up, because we want our thumb pointing up to the sky. So I like to say, hey, This is our bus driver. This is our bus. The bus driver, he's going to be in the small opening here. And then we have 3 kids who's going to be on the bus. And they go into the big opening there. All right, so that is how we want our kids to have their fingers positioned. And we always, again, cue them verbally. Make sure your thumb is up. One thing to take notice is when your child is cutting, if they have a chicken wing, their arm is always out. We want to try to encourage them to have their elbow right there by their side. If this is something that they struggle with, a lot of times I like to get a piece of paper or a folder and have them work on holding this with their elbow under their arm to try to remind them no chicken wing, because if they chicken wing, it's going to drop. So the next thing I like to work on is helper hand. Helper hand? That's what we like to call our hand that stabilizes our paper when we're cutting. This can be a very challenging task for our kiddos because not only are they worrying about their fingers being positioned, their elbow down, their opening and closing, their scissors, keeping that thumb upright, and keeping their bodies sitting nice in a chair. That's a lot to be thinking about. So now let's throw in helper hand. Helper hand is to hold their paper while they're cutting. Open, close, open, close. Now, if your child struggles with helper hand, sometimes I like to put just a sticker as a visual cue of where to hold it. Some kiddos, they need that extra support, so you may have to help them. So do like a hand over hand to help them hold. And then once they are latched on, a lot of times I like to fade my prompting, meaning I would start backing up, maybe just holding their wrist, maybe their elbow, and then eventually just letting go, just to encourage them to independently hold their paper. If you notice that they have trouble using both their hands at the same time, you may want to work on what we call bilateral activities. It's best to do this during play because kiddos, they have no idea that you're trying to work on a skill. Maybe it's to sit down and roll a ball or catch a ball with both hands, sitting and coloring, and they have to hold their paper because once you start coloring, there goes your paper. Also, a good time is during meals. If you're having your child work on feeding themselves, again, they need to hold their plate so it doesn't get knocked over. Again, drinking from a cup, using both hands. So there's all kinds of activities that can work on using both hands. Another skill to be aware of is visual attention. When our kiddos are cutting, they really need to be able to have eyes looking at the paper. A lot of times you may see kiddos doing this. Uh-oh, there went those scissors off the paper, or even worse, we don't want them to cut their fingers or anything. So if you notice that visual attention is really difficult for your child, you may want to eliminate any distractions, whether it be the television, music playing, their siblings in the room playing, really anything that's going to take their eyes off of their cutting. This is challenging for myself when I'm working in the classroom with a child, especially whenever all their friends are around. A lot of times I will see them looking over here, looking at what Johnny's doing. So I try to use a verbal cue of eyes looking. Now, that does work for some kids, but other kids, they're just not there yet. They need extra support. So I will use a trifold as a visual divider just to help them be able to focus on our cutting activity. And really, you can make one of these out of one of the science fair trifold boards. Just cut it in half, or even just put up a 3-ring binder, just a small area, just for a short period of time. That way it helps them focus on what they're trying to do. The last tip I have for you is working on finger strength. A lot of our little ones, they just have really weak fingers. Going back to the pre-cutting activities when I shared with you kind of the progression with using tissue paper and then going to the newspaper and then construction paper, because that's going to give resistance. Same thing with cutting. A lot of times I will have a child cut cardstock because it's thicker and it requires more pressure, and it also gives them more support, more control, because cutting flimsy paper is very difficult, where cutting the cardstock, it's easier to hold on to with your helper hand and just to make cuts. So keep that in mind whenever you're working on cutting.